Hello friends, welcome back to our e-teaching channel. So I'm back with the various chapters of Immortals of Meluha, the part 1 of Shiva Trilogy. So today we will start with chapter 15, and before that a short recap of chapter 14, Pandit of Mohenjo-daro. We saw in the previous episode, Shiva reveals his pains over the Vikarma law to the Pandit of Mohenjo-daro, and the Pandit in turn clears Shiva that he is the one to change the unfair laws if he thinks it is, and also makes Shiva realize that what Sati needs from his respect. Later part, we saw Shiva meets Juleshwar, the governor of Karachapa. Now let's proceed to chapter 15, Trial by Fire. The little boy hurried through a dusty goat trail, trying to avoid the sharp stones bundling into his fur coat. The dense wet forest encroached on the path menacingly. It was difficult to see beyond the trees lining the narrow path. The boy was sure that there were terrible monsters lurking in the dense foliage, waiting to pounce on him if he slowed down. His village was but a few hours away. The sun was fast setting behind the mountains. Monsters love the darkness. He had heard his mother and grandmother say repeatedly when he was being difficult. He would have liked being accompanied by an elder, as monsters did not trouble the elders. His heart skipped a beat as he heard a strange heaving sound. He immediately drew out his short sword, suspecting an attack from behind. His friends had heard many stories about the monsters of the forest. The cowards never attacked from the front. He stood still, straining to determine the direction of the sound. It had a peculiar repetitive rhythm and seemed vaguely familiar. He felt as though he had heard it before. The heaving was now accompanied by a heavy grunting male voice. This was not a monster. The boy felt excitement run through his body. He had heard his friends whisper in giggles about it, but never seen the act himself. This was his chance. He crept slowly into the foliage, his sword dangling by his side. He did not have to go too far when he came upon the source of the sound. It came from a small clearing. He bit behind a tree trunk and peeped. It was a couple. They seemed to be in a hurry. They had not even disrobed completely. The man was extraordinarily hairy, almost like a bear. The boy could see just his back from this angle. He had a frontal view of the woman. She was astonishingly beautiful. Her wavy hair, long and lustrous, the partly torn blouse revealed a firm breast with deep red welts due to the brutal intercourse. Her skirt had been ripped and revealed exquisite long legs. The boy was excited beyond imagination. Wait till his best friend Bhadra heard of this. As he enjoyed the show, his disquiet grew. Something seemed amiss. The man was in the throes of passion, while the woman lay passive, almost dead. Her hands lay lifeless by her side. Her mouth was tightly shut. She was not whispering encouragements to her lover. Were those tears of ecstasy rolling down her cheeks, or was she being forced? But how could that be? The man's knife lay within the woman's reach. She could have picked up the blade and stabbed him if she wanted. The boy shook his head. He tried to silence his conscience. Just shut up. I jet me look. And then came the moment that would haunt him for the rest of his life. The woman's eyes suddenly fell upon him. "Help!" she cried out. "Please help!" The startled boy fell back, dropping his sword. The hairy monster turned to see who the woman was calling. The boy quickly picked up his sword and fled, ignoring the searing pain on his frostbitten foot as he ran. He was terrified at the thought that the man was chasing him. He could hear the man's heavy breathing. The boy leapt onto the goat trail and sped towards his village. He could still hear the heavy breathing. It was drawing closer every second. The boy suddenly swerved to his left, pivoted, and slashed back with his sword. There was nobody there, no sound of heavy breathing. The only sound was the haunting plea of a distraught woman. "Help! Please help!" The little boy looked back. "That poor woman! Go back! Help her!" cried his inner voice. He hesitated for a moment, then turned and fled towards his village. "No, go back! Help her!" Shiva woke up sweating, his heart pounding madly. He instinctively turned around, wanting desperately to go back to that dreadful day, to redeem himself, but there would be no redemption. The woman's terrified face came flooding back. He shut his eyes. But how do you shut your eyes to an image branded on your mind? He pulled his knees up and rested his head on them. Then he did the only thing that helped. He cried. The Yagna platform had been set up at the central square of the Dutiya platform. For Karachapa, it was not the usual austere affair typical of Meluha. The frontier city had decorated the area with bright colors that weighed for attention. The platform itself had been painted in a bright golden hue. Colorfully decorated poles festooned with flowers held aloft a shamiana, a cloth canopy. Red and blue pennants with the Suryavanshi symbol painted on hung proudly from many poles. The entire atmosphere was that of pomp and show. Juleshwar received Shiva at the head of the platform and guided him to his ritual seat at the yagna. At the governor's repeated request, Shiva had removed his cravat for the duration of the ceremony. Parvateshwar and Brihaspati sat to the right of the Nilkanth, while Juleshwar and Ayurvati sat to his left. Nandi and Veerbhadra had also been invited to sit behind Shiva. Though this was unorthodox, Juleshwar had acceded to the Neelakanth's request. Juleshwar governed a cosmopolitan border city and believed that many of the strict Meluhan laws could be bent slightly for the sake of expediency. His liberal attitude had made Karachapa a magnet for people from a wide variety of races and a hub for the exchange of goods, services, and ideas. Shiva looked towards Sati's balcony, which overlooked the central square in the distance. Though Sati was not allowed to step on the platform while the yagna was being conducted, she could look on at the proceedings from the safe distance of her chambers. Shiva noticed her standing behind the balcony curtain with Kritika by her side, observing the proceedings. As was the custom before such a yagna, the Pandit stood up and asked formally, "If anybody here has any objection to this yagna, please speak now, or forever hold your peace." This was just a traditional question which was not actually supposed to be answered. Hence, there was an audible collective groan when a voice cried out loudly, "I object." Nobody needed to look to recognize where the voice came from. It was Tarak, an immigrant from the ultra-conservative northwest regions of the empire. Since Tarak had come to Karachapa, he had taken it upon himself to be the moral police of this decadent city of sin. Shiva strained his neck to see who had objections. He saw Tarak standing at the back at the edge of the puja platform, very close to Sati's balcony. He was a giant of a man with a fair face cut up brutally due to a lifetime of strife, an immense stomach, and a miner's bulging muscular arms. He cut an awesome figure. It was obvious without even looking at his amulets that Tarak was a Kshatriya who had made his living working in the lower ranks of the army. Juleshwar glared at Tarak in exasperation. What is it now? This time we have ensured that we have not used the white Chandravanshi colors in our decorations. Or do you think the water being used for the ceremony is not at the correct temperature as per the Vedas? The gathering sniggered. Parvateshwar looked at Juleshwar sharply. Before he could reprimand the governor for his cavalier reference to the Vedas, Tarak spoke up. The law says no Vikarma should be allowed on the Yagna platform. Yes, said Juleshwar, and unless you have been declared a Vikarma, I don't think the law is being broken. Yes, it is. There were shocked murmurs from the congregation. Juleshwar raised his hand. Nobody is a Vikarma here, Tarak, said Juleshwar. Now please sit down. Princess Sati defiles the yagna with her presence. Shiva and Parvateshwar looked sharply at Tarak. Juleshwar was as stunned as the rest of the assembly by Tarak's statement. Tarak, said Juleshwar, you go too far. Princess Sati is confined in the guest house, abiding by the laws of the yagna. She is not present on the yagna platform. Now sit down before I have you whipped. On what charge will you have me whipped, Governor? Yelled Tarak. Standing up for the law is not a crime in Meluha. But the law has not been broken. Yes, it has. The exact words of the law is that no Vikarma can be on the same platform while a yagna is being conducted. The yagna is being conducted on the Dvitiya platform of the city. By being on the same platform, the princess defiles the yagna. Tarak was technically correct. Most people interpreted the law to mean that a Vikarma could not be on the prayer ceremony platform. However, since Karachapa, like most Meluhan cities, was built on a platform, a strict interpretation of the law would mean that Sati should not be anywhere on the entire Dvitiya platform. To keep the yagna legal, she would either have to move to the other platform of the city or outside the city walls. Juleshwar was momentarily taken aback as Tarak's objection was accurate in principle. He tried a rally weakly. Come, Tarak, you are being too concilious. I think that is too strict an interpretation, I think. No, Shri Juleshwar, reverberated a loud voice through the gathering. Everybody turned to see where the sound came from. Sati, who had come out on her balcony, continued. Please accept my apologies for interrupting you, Governor, said Sati with a formal namaste. But Tarak's interpretation of the law is fair. I am terribly sorry to have disturbed the yagna. My entourage and I shall leave the city immediately. We will return by the beginning of the third prahar, by which time the ceremony should be over. Shiva clenched his fist. He frantically wanted to wring Tarak's neck, but he controlled himself with superhuman effort. Within minutes, Sati was out of the guest house, along with Kritika and 5 personal bodyguards. Shiva turned to look at Nandi and Veerbhadra, both of whom rose to join Sati. They understood that Shiva wanted them to ensure that she was safe outside the city. It is disgusting that you did not realize this yourself, Tarak said scornfully to Sati. What kind of a princess are you? Don't you respect the law? Sati looked at Tarak, her face calm. She refused to be drawn into a debate and waited patiently for her guards to prepare the horses. I don't understand what a Vikarma woman is doing traveling with the convoy of the Nilkant. She is polluting the entire journey, ragged Tarak. Enough, intervened Shiva. Princess Sati is leaving with dignity. Stop your diatribe right now. I will not, screeched Tarak. What kind of a leader are you? You are challenging Lord Ram's laws. Tarak, yelled Juleshwar. The Lord Nilkant has a right to challenge the law. If you value your life, you will not defy his authority. I am a Meluhan, shrieked Tarak. It is my right to challenge anyone breaking the law. Adobe, a mere washerman, challenged Lord Ram. It was his greatness that he acceded to the man's objection and renounced his wife. I would urge the Nilkant to learn from Lord Ram's example and use his brains for making decisions. Enough, Tarak, erupted Sati. The entire congregation was turned into silence by Tarak's remark, but not Sati. Something inside her snapped. She had tolerated too many insults for too long, and she had endured them with quiet dignity. But this time, this man had insulted Shiva, her Shiva. She finally acknowledged to herself, I invoke the right of Agni Pariksha, said Sati, back in control. The stunned onlookers could not believe their ears. A trial by fire? This was getting worse and worse. Under Agni Pariksha, an unfairly injured soul could challenge their tormentor to a duel. It was called Agni Pariksha as combat would take place within a ring of fire. There was no escape from the ring. The duelist had to keep fighting till one person surrendered or died. And Agni Pariksha was extremely rare these days, and for a woman to invoke the right was almost unheard of. There is no reason for this, my lady, pleaded Juleshwar. Just like his subjects, he was terrified that Princess Sati might be killed in his city. For the Gargantuan Tarak would certainly slay her. The emperor's wrath would be terrible. Turning to Tarak, Juleshwar ordered, You will not accept this challenge and be called a coward. You want to prove your bravery? Spoke Parvateshwar for the first time. Then fight with me. I will act as Sati's second for the challenge. Only I have the right to appoint a second Pitritulya, said Sati, reverentially referring to Parvateshwar as being like a father. Turning to Tarak, she said, I am appointing no second. You will fight with me. You will do no such thing, Tarak, Brahaspati objected this time. Tarak, the only reason you would not want to fight is if you are afraid of being killed, said Shiva. Every person turned towards Nilkant, shocked by his words. Turning to Sati, Shiva continued, Citizens of Karachapa, I have seen the princess fight. She can defeat anyone, even the gods. Sati stared at Shiva, shocked. I accept the challenge, growled Tarak. Sati nodded at Tarak, climbed on her white steed and turned to leave. At the edge of the square, she pulled up her horse and turned to take one more look at Shiva. She smiled at him, turned and rode away. It was the beginning of the third prahar as Shiva and Brihaspati stole quietly into the local Varjish Graha, the exercise hall. to observe Tarak exercising with two partners. The day's yagna had been a disaster, with everyone petrified that the princess would die the next day. No one was inclined to participate in the ceremony. However, as the yagna had been called, it had to be conducted or the gods would be offended. The congregation went through the motions and the yagna was called to a close. Tarak's famed fearsome blows on his hapless partners filled Brihaspati's soul with dread, and he came to an immediate decision. I will assassinate him tonight. She will not die tomorrow. Shiva turned in stunned disbelief to the chief scientist. Brihaspati, what are you saying? Sati is too noble to meet a fate such as this. I am willing to sacrifice my life and reputation for her. But you are a Brahmin. You are not supposed to kill. I will do it for you, whispered Brihaspati, emotions clouding his judgment. You will not lose her, my friend. Shiva came close to Brihaspati and hugged him. Don't corrupt your soul, my friend. I am not worth such a big sacrifice. Don't corrupt your soul, my friend. I am not worth such a big sacrifice. Brihaspati clung to Shiva. Stepping back, Shiva whispered, In any case, your sacrifice is not required. For as sure as the sun rises in the east, Sati will defeat Tarak tomorrow. A few hours into the third prahar, Sati returned to the guest house. She did not go up to her room, but summoned Nandi and Veerbhadra to the central courtyard, drew her sword and began her practice with them. A little later, Parvateshwar walked in, looking broken. His expression clearly conveyed his fear that this might be the last time he would talk to Sati. She stopped practicing, sheathed her sword, and folded her hands into a respectful namaste. Pitratulyam, she whispered. Parvateshwar came close to Sati, his face distraught. She could not be sure, but it seemed as though he had been crying. She had never seen even a hint of a tear in his confident eyes. My child, mumbled Parvateshwar, I am doing what I think is right, said Sati. I am happy. Parvateshwar could not find the strength to say anything. For a brief moment, he considered assassinating Tarak at night, but that would be illegal. Just then, Shiva and Brihaspati walked in. Shiva noticed Parvateshwar's face. This was the first time he had seen any sign of weakness in the general. While he could understand Parvateshwar's predicament, he did not like the effect it was having on Sati. I'm sorry I'm late, said Shiva cheerily. Everyone turned to look at him. Actually, Brihaspati and I had gone to the Lord Varun temple to pray for Tarak, said Shiva. We prayed that the journey his soul would take to the other world would be comfortable. Sati burst out laughing. So did the rest of the party in the courtyard. Bhadra, you are not the right opponent for the practice, said Shiva. You move too fast. Nandi, you duel with the princess and control your agility. Turning to Sati, Shiva continued. I saw Tarak practice. His blows have tremendous power, but the force of the blow slows him down. Turn his strength into his weakness. Use your agility against his movements. Sati nodded, absorbing every word. She resumed her practice with Nandi, moving rapidly compared to Nandi's slower movements. Sati was able to succeed in a strike that could be killed. Suddenly, an idea struck Shiva. Instructing Nandi to stop, he asked Sati, Are you allowed to choose the combat weapon? Yes, it's my prerogative, as I threw the challenge. Then choose the knife. It will reduce the reach of his strikes, while you can move in and out much quicker. That's brilliant, concurred Parvateshwar, while Brihaspati nodded. Sati signaled her agreement immediately. Almost at the same instant, Veerbhadra emerged with two knives. Giving one to Nandi, he gave the other to Sati. Practice, my lady. Sati and Tarak stood at the center of the circular stadium. This was not the main Rangbhumi of Karachapa, which was gargantuan in its proportions. This one had been constructed next to the main stadium for music concerts that the Mesopotamian immigrants in Karachapa loved. The arena was of the exact dimensions required for an Agni Pariksha. Not so big that a person could simply steer clear of the other contestants, and not too small so that the combat would end fast. There were stands around the ground, and a capacity crowd of over 20,000 had come to watch the most important duel in Karachapa for the last 500 years. There was a prayer on every lip. Let Father Manu cause a simple miracle so that Princess Sati would win, or at the very least, Eve. Both Tarak and Sati greeted each other with a namaste, repeating an ancient pledge to fight with honor. Then, turning to the statue of Lord Varun at the top of the main stand, they bowed, asking for blessings from the god of the water and the seas. Juleshwar had vacated his ceremonial seat right below the statue of Lord Varun for Shiva. The governor sat to Shiva's left, with Ayurvati and Kritika to his left. Brihaspati and Parvateshwar sat to Shiva's right. Nandi and Veerbhadra were in their now familiar position behind Shiva. A bird courier had been sent to Daksha the previous day informing of the duel. However, there was not enough time to expect a reply. At long last, Juleshwar stood up. He was nervous about the Agni Pariksha, but appeared composed. As per custom, he raised a bald fist to his heart and boomed Satya Dharmaman, an invocation to truth, duty, honor. The rest of the stadium rang in agreement, Satya Dharmaman. Tarak and Sati echoed, Satya Dharmaman. Juleshwar nodded to the stadium keeper who lit the ceremonial oil lamp with the holy fire. The lamp spilled its fire on the oil channel. The periphery of the central ground was aflame. The ring for the pariksha had been set. Juleshwar turned to Shiva. My lord, your instructions to start the duel. Shiva looked at Sati with a confident smile. Then, turning to the stadium, he declared loudly, In the purifying fire of Lord Agni, the truth will always triumph. Tarak and Sati immediately drew their knives. Tarak held his knife in front of him, like most traditional fighters. He had chosen a strategy that played to his strengths. Keeping his knife in front of him allowed him to strike the moment Sati came close. He did not stir too much, allowing Sati to make her moves in front of him. Sati, breaking all known rules of combat, held her knife behind her. She shifted the knife continuously from one hand to the other while keeping a safe distance from her opponent. The aim was to confuse Tarak about the direction of her attack. Tarak, on the other hand, was watching Sati's movement like a hawk. He saw her right arm flex. The knife was now in her right hand. Suddenly, Sati leapt to the left. Tarak remained stationary. He knew that with her right hand holding the knife, the leftward movement was a feint. She would have to move to the right to bring her knife into play. Sure enough, Sati quickly moved to the right and brought in her arm up in a stabbing motion. Tarak was prepared. Shifting his knife quickly to his left arm, he slashed viciously, cutting across her torso. It was not a deep cut, but it appeared to hurt. A collective gasp went out from the audience. Sati retreated and rallied. She moved the knife to her back again, transferring it from one hand to the other. Tarak kept a close eye on her arms. The knife was in her left hand. He expected her to move to the right, which she did. He remained immobile, waiting for her to swerve suddenly to her left. She did, swinging her left arm as she moved. Tarak acted before her arm could even come close enough to do any damage. He swung ferociously with his right arm and cut her deep in the left shoulder. Sati retreated rapidly as the congregation moaned in horror. Some shut their eyes. They could not bear to look any more. Most were praying fervently. If it had to be done, let it be done swiftly and not in a slow, painful manner. What is she doing? Whispered a panic-stricken Brihaspati to Shiva. Why is she charging in so recklessly? Shiva turned to look at Brihaspati, also noticing Parvateshwar's face. Parvateshwar had a surprised yet admiring grin on his face. Unlike Brihaspati, he knew what was going on. Turning back to look at the duel, Shiva whispered, "She is laying a trap." At the center, Sati was still transferring the knife between her hands behind her back. She feigned a move from her right to the left, but this time did not transfer the knife. She flexed her left arm, keeping the right arm holding the knife loose and relaxed. Tarak was watching Sati closely, confident that he was going to slowly bleed her to death. He believed the knife was in her left hand. He waited for her to move right, then left, which she did in a swift veer. Expecting her left arm to come in, he sliced with his right hand. Sati neatly pirouetted back. Before a surprised Tarak could react, Sati had leapt to her right and brought her right hand in brutally onto Tarak's chest, the knife piercing Tarak's lung. The shock of the blow immobilized Tarak. Blood spurted from his mouth. He dropped his knife and staggered back. Sati ruthlessly maintained the pressure and dug the knife in deeper right up to the hilt. Tarak stumbled back and collapsed to the ground, motionless. The entire stadium was stunned. Sati's face had the expression of the mother goddess in fury. 85 years of repressed anger had surfaced in that instant. She pulled the knife out, slowly twisting it to inflict maximum damage. Blood spewed out from Tarak's mouth at an alarming rate. She raised the knife with both her hands. All she had to do was bring it down on his heart, and Tarak would meet his maker. Then suddenly her expression became calm again. It was almost as if someone had sucked out all the negative energy inside her. She turned around. Shiva, the destroyer of evil, sat on his throne, staring at her with a slight smile. Then she looked at Tarak and whispered, "I forgive you." The stadium erupted in joy. Even if Lord Varun had himself scripted the fight, it would not have been as perfect. It had everything that the Suryavanshis held dear. Defiant when under pressure, yet magnanimous in victory. Sati raised her knife and shouted, Jai Shri Ram. The entire stadium repeated, Jai Shri Ram. Sati turned towards Shiva and roared once again, Jai Shri Ram. Jai. Shiva's words were clogged by the knot in his throat. The Lord won't mind this time if I don't complete the cry. Shiva glanced away from Sati lest he show his tears to the woman he loved. Regaining control of himself, he looked back at her with a radiant smile. Sati continued to stare at Shiva. Emotions had been dormant in her for too long, rippled through her being as she saw Shiva's admiration. When she could not bear it any longer, she shut her eyes. Om Namah Shivaya. Do subscribe to our e-teaching channel for further interesting videos and audiobooks. Give us a thumbs up if you like our videos and share with your friends and family. Comment us to improve our work better. Thank you.